Okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming. I know people didn't physically have to go very far, but sometimes just getting to sit in front of your computer with everything going on at home, it's still existentially can be a long trip. So what I would like to talk about this afternoon, this morning, if you're in America, is how we view Yetziat Mitzrayim and how we view the Egyptians, because our relationship with the Egyptians is complicated. Even though from the time that we heard the story as children, we clump all the bad guys together. It's confusing whether you're talking about Paro or Achashverosh or Antiochus or later villains. They all get clumped together, and there's the good guys and the bad guys. But in truth, the relationships that we have are much more complicated. In the Torah, they're already more complicated because, of course, on the one hand, Mitzrayim is our oppressor, but at the same time, we have a mitzvah, there's a positive commandment it's a negative commandment, lo teta'ev mitzri ki ger hayita ba'artso. If someone from Mitzrayim comes to be mitgayer, according to Chazal's interpretation of this pasuk, you're not allowed to reject them simply because they're Egyptian. Because ger hayita ba'artso. So there's this element of hakarat hatov that because Egypt took us in the years of famine, we owe them something. You would think that debt was paid, but nonetheless, it shows that the relationship is complicated. So I would like to begin with Mea Shiloach. I sent it to you in the chat. I sent you the document, but I will share my screen for at least for this piece. I'm going to share my screen here. Okay. I hope you can see that. Okay. So I'm doing this Mea Shiloach. Okay. Vayomer Moshe lama hareota, right? La'am hazeh, lama zeh shlachtani. Moshe, after the process of redemption doesn't go exactly the way he anticipated, because God sent him to Paro, and he was expecting all the Jews to rally around, and then they would leave Egypt. But things only got worse initially. So Moshe Rabbeinu complains to God. Vayomer Moshe lama hareota. So the Mea Shiloach says, Hine lefi hareut, on the face of it, hu pele ech yatsa mipi Moshe davar kazeh neged Hashem yitbarach. How could he speak so harshly against God? Ach be'emet, in truth, Moshe Rabbeinu haya ohev Yisrael. He spoke out of love for Israel. V'ka'asher shama mipi hagvura, ki yitztarchu liot od b'Mitzrayim ad achar hamakot she'avru al Mitzrayim. When he understood, when God communicated to him that the Jews would need to remain in Egypt until after the Makot. Az sha'al, then he asked God, Halo bi'atcha b'regeh echad lifdot et Yisrael, v'lama yiyu b'Mitzrayim yud beit chodesh, l'rot hamakot, she'yifchedu mipneihem. So his question of God was as follows: why is it necessary for the Israelites to remain in Egypt? You have the capability, you have the strength to redeem them immediately. Why do they have to go through the turmoil of the Makot? L'rot hamakot she'yifchedu mehem, because they themselves are afraid, will be terror-stricken by the Makot. K'mo shekatuv, asher yagorta mipneihem. Right? In Sefer Dvarim, when Moshe Rabbeinu tells the people the story of the Makot, is the Makot which you yourselves were terrified of. Ki be'emet yaru gam Yisrael me'amakot. Because the Israelites were also terrorized by the Makot. This is a different picture maybe than, there are a lot of the biblical stories, precisely because we're taught them when we're children. We sometimes maintain the childish picture of the stories, and we never mature. Our view of the stories never mature. Just like the story of the Mabul is like this happy, the animals and the rainbow, and the animals going into the Teva. That was a pretty horrific, it's a pretty horrific story where the human race and life gets wiped out on the planet, right? We're only experiencing a very small piece of that terror today. But the Mabul was a total destruction of humanity. And yet it's pictured as there's this colorful, it's for children, Noah's Ark, etc. So here also, the story of Eser Makot was pretty terrible. And what he's saying here, based on the Psukim, is that it wasn't only terrible for the Egyptians, it was terrorizing for the Jews to witness it. Now, why was it so terrible for the Jews to witness it? Because, let's see, Ki be'emet yaru gam Yisrael me'amakot, because the Jews were also terrorized with the Makot. V'lachein sha'al zot me'akadosh baruch hu. That's why he asked about that, where he actually attacked God on that point. V'her'alo hakadosh baruch hu, ki gam bazeh yesh tzorech liYisrael. Ki be'emet haya lehem liYisrael eze shayachut im Mitzrayim. The Makot were necessary for Yisrael, because Yisrael had a relationship with Mitzrayim. Shayachut leMitzrayim is actually more than a relationship in this context. It means that Yisrael and Mitzrayim were intertwined, and the Makot of the Mitzrayim is something that the Israelites experienced as attacking them as well, and that's where the fear comes from. Haya lehem shayachut liYisrael leMitzrayim. The Jews were intertwined with Egypt, and the Makot were necessary for Israel. They weren't only, or maybe not even primarily, designed to punish the Egyptians. In this sense, the Egyptians are styrofoam. They're just packaging for the story. We don't really care. In terms of the story, we don't really care about the Egyptians. What we care about in the story is the process through which the Jews go through in the liberation. That's what we care about. So the Egyptians are really just styrofoam. Kamo shekatuv, lakachat lo goy mikerev goy. The Jews were so intertwined with the Egyptians. Hainu keubar hanishmat mi beten imo, sheyesh lo sheyachut im imo. So the description that he gives in terms of the relationship with the Egyptians is organic. The Jew, think of it this way. Think of the beginning of Sefer Shemot, where you have Ubnei Yisrael, Paru. Think of a womb that's growing. Paru, Vayishritzu, Vayebu, B'ma'od, Ma'od. Right? So the Jews are growing in the womb of the Egyptians. And this is a very powerful image, because birthing imagery is found throughout the story. If you just think about it for a moment, think about the blood on the passageway and the waters of the sea breaking and the people emerging. It's a very powerful birthing image, right? So that is what the Torah is saying when it says "Lakachat lo goy mikerev goy," and the interpretation of that is "Keubar hanishmat mi beten imo." It's really like a birth. So then you can think about the Makot, which happened prior to the birth as these chevlei leida, as these birth pangs, which initiate the separation between the child and the mother. So we have a story here, in a sense, of an evil mother that doesn't want to give the life up from inside of her. But that's an ancient theme. You have a similar theme in the Mesopotamian creation myth, where Tiamat, Tammuz, right? Tiamat has to be torn apart in order for the waters of the world to emerge. So in the creation myth, the Marduk tears apart Tiamat, and the waters which come from her womb are turned into the oceans, and her body turns into Mother Earth. Right? It's a very violent picture of Mother Earth. Right? So you have Mother Earth and the oceans after she was torn apart. So this is Mitzrayim. Mitzrayim needs to be torn apart for the Jews to emerge. And there's blood, and there's water, right? And there's people that are emerging. This is Ku'ubar Hanishmat Mei Beten Imo. And that means She'eshel Shayachut Imo. Because there's an organic connection between Yisrael and Mitzrayim. And then you can understand why, if you go back and say, where the Torah says, Lo teta'ev Mitzri ki ger hayita ba'artso, is you gestated in Mitzrayim. And the Jewish people, it's very interesting, as opposed to what it says in Megillat HaAtzmaut of the State of Israel. It says, Be'eretz Yisrael kam ha'ama Yehudi, right, giving a brief history of the connection of the Jewish people to the land of Israel. It says, Be'eretz Yisrael kam ha'ama Yehudi. It's not true. Ha'ama Yehudi lo kam be'eretz Yisrael. Ha'ama Yehudi kam be'Mitzrayim. Right? The gestation was in Mitzrayim, and we emerged from Mitzrayim. And that's what's being described here. Ke'ubar hanishmat mi beten imo. Sheyesh lo shayachut im imo. V'lachein, I'm continuing, v'lachein hutzruchu gam heim lihitbarer v'lifchod mehem. And therefore, the people needed to become distinct from the Egyptians and to be in fear of the Makot, to fear the Makot together with the Egyptians, and to experience the Makot as something that could happen to them because they're part of the Egyptian, let's talk about it this way, they're part of the Egyptian body. We talk about being part of a body politic, right? So they're part of the Egyptian body. And if the Egyptian body is stricken, they are also stricken. And that strikes fear. V'zeh pachad, and this fear, haya mizakech et libam. And this fear is what cleanses their hearts. And it also makes them understand that they have to be distinct from the Egyptians. Okay? So so what we have here is a picture of the people being organically intertwined with the Egyptians. And in a sense, you have, well, let's continue here. I want to look at a different Mea Shiloach, a short Mea Shiloach, based on the pasuk of Bnei Yisrael, Uvnei Yisrael yotzim biyad Ramah. This has to do with the nature of the separation. How is it that we separate? Okay? So let's go back to the screen here. Okay? So let's take a look at the pasuk here. Vayichazek Hashem et leiv Paro melech Mitzrayim, vayirdof acharei bnei Yisrael, uvnei Yisrael yotzim biyad Ramah. So the people are being yotzei, quote unquote, biyad Ramah. Yad Ramah is a description of their state of mind. So what does biyad Ramah mean? So we have the Targum Yonatan, who basically sticks to the text, to the Hebrew text. Uvnei Yisrael, it's the next source here. Uvnei Yisrael nafkin biyada miramima mitgabrim al Mitzray. Right? So Bnei Israel are leaving biyad ramah with a upheld arm, right, with a high hand. Okay, but if we take a look at Onkelos changes it. Onkelos says as follows: "V'takaf Hashem yat liba de Paro," right? God strengthened the heart of Paro, Malka de Mitzrayim. V'radaf batar b'nei Israel, and he pursued the children of Israel. U'b'nei Israel nafkin bereish gali, and the children of Israel yotzim. Now he doesn't translate Yad Ramah the way the Targum Yonatan does, which is Yada Miramima. That would be the Aramaic translation. He changes it to Reish Gali, the head held high. So is it the Yada Miramima or is it Bereish Gali? And what's the difference? Okay. So let's take a look here at the Mei HaShiloach. Uvenei Yisrael yotzim biyad Ramah. Targumo Bereish Gali. Right, he's quoting Onkelos with the head held high. Hainu lo biyad Ramah neged acherim b'ga'ava v'geut rak shehem b'nei chorim b'li yir'ah ufachad mishum adam. Okay, I want to read that again. Lo biyad Ramah neged acherim b'ga'ava u'v'geut rak shehem b'nei chorin b'li yir'ah v'fachad mishum adam. So the picture that the Mei HaShiloach is painting is, what does Yad Ramah mean according to him? Yad Ramah would be neged acherim. It's very easy for people that have been oppressed and they get their political freedom, that their freedom is a reaction to their oppression. So they're always being reactive. When that's the case, they're never really free because they're always reacting to where they were. And that is what the Mei HaShiloach is concerned about. Lo biyad Ramah neged acherim. And now look at the Targum Yonatan. Biyada miramima mitgabrim al mitzroi. The Yad Ramah is shaking its hand, shaking its fist against the Egyptians. It's very reactive. I have to tell you, I try to stay away from politics, so I won't take a political stance on this. But in terms of the symbol, right? Whenever you see the symbol of the fist with the Magen David around it, right? It always gives me goosebumps, and I think of this. That's not really freedom. It's reactive. It's a different type of shiabud. You become a prisoner of the memory of your oppression. And there's a very serious danger that the oppressor, the oppressed will become the oppressor. That's something that's a real danger, that there's an identification. Look, the identification of the Israelites and the Mitzrim, you see it in the Pshat and the Torah, that when things get rough in the desert, the people want to go back to Mitzrayim. Efshar lachshov, you can think, how wonderful was it in Egypt? They wanted to go back to Egypt. There's a very strong sense. There's a...
Okay.
If you can mute yourselves, I would appreciate it. Okay. One moment then. Let me see here. Okay. I'm sorry for that disturbance. Okay, so we have, I don't know if you remember, we're talking about the identification that the victim has with the victimizer. There was in the, I think it was the was it the 1970s? Do you remember Patty Hearst, who was her father was the right. She was an heiress, and she was kidnapped. And
Symbionese Liberation Army.
Right, the Symbionese Liberation Army, right? So so she was kidnapped, and then it turned out that she was robbing banks together with them, right? So that's called the Stockholm syndrome, right? Where the hostages begin to it's a defense mechanism. They identify with the terrorists. So there's a very serious danger, because the Eved, the slave, both hates the master but wants to be just like the master, right? That's why the first mitzvah that Bnei Israel get after Yetziat Mitzrayim is Shabbos, and the first parsha after Aseret HaDibrot in Parshat Mishpatim is Eved Ivri, is that the freedom cannot turn into this to this will for power, where the whole problem was that the other group had power, but we want the power. That's not freedom. Then you become mishuabad. Basically, you can understand what it says in the Haggadah. She'il lo atzir Kadosh Baruch Hu et bnei Yisrael Mitzrayim hayinu anu uvanenu uvnei banenu mishuabadim hayinu leparo b'Mitzrayim. It was the freedom that had to come out of Egypt was separation from Egypt psychologically. It wasn't sufficient to remove them physically and to give them political freedom, because then we could still be enslaved psychologically by virtue of the fact that we were always reacting to the Egyptians. And that's the concern of the Mea Shiloach. Lo biyad rama neged acherim b'ga'ava v'ge'ut. That would be the wrong lesson. It would be the wrong consciousness to take out of Egypt. Rak shehem b'nei chorim, b'li yir'ava fachad mishum adam. Some sort of positive freedom, not negative freedom. What Eric Fromm called freedom to, as opposed to freedom from. Right? Freedom from would be always looking back. And that's why you always have this imagery of not to look back to Egypt. And the wife of Lot was commanded not to look back. They were commanded not to look back at Sodom, because you have to move forward, and you can't remain a slave looking backwards, because there's much more to freedom than removing the political chains. That is the concern of the Mea Shiloach. So there's a danger of learning the wrong lessons from the shiabud, because if we look at our own history, right, the shiabud of the Jewish people for 2,000 years, and we were terribly persecuted. Some periods of time were better than others. Some periods of time, of course, were much more horrific. And if you look at the sojourn in Mitzrayim, it was similar. There were times which were not as bad, and of course, thinking about the throwing the children into the sea. So that's not so far removed from a picture of the Shoah. So you have some terrible times, and the question is what you extract from that. And there's a danger that the glasses through which we see the world will be colored in a way by our past experiences, in a way which is not justified. I'll give you a simple application of this today. Israel has a very serious conflict with the Palestinians. Whatever you think about that conflict, and whether you think there's a solution, there's no solution, whatever you think politically we should do or we shouldn't do, what we can do, what we can't do, that's not the issue. But whatever you say, the Palestinians are not Nazis. They're not Nazis. They can be our enemies. They can be our very cruel enemies, however you want to describe it. But they're not Nazis. And the use of taking that picture and applying it to a totally new type of situation is just, it's just off. You know, there aren't pogroms, and they're not Baruch Hashem, there aren't gas chambers, and we're not defenseless. There's a major shift. But if we approach our present day situation as if we're still powerless victims, it becomes very hazardous in terms of how we treat others, and also how we read the reality and how we can extract ourselves from the real problems that we have. If we're approaching them with models which are no longer relevant. So it's a very important to take the right lessons and not the wrong lessons. So in terms of what I believe are the right lessons, right? We have in Perek Chav Gimel in Sefer Shmot, we have v'ger lo tilchatz v'atem yedatem et nefesh hager ki gerim hayitem be'eretz Mitzrayim. The correct consciousness to take with us from Mitzrayim is the empathy towards those who suffer, the empathy towards the stranger, right? And there's a very important diuk here. It says, v'yadatem et nefesh hager. So Rabbeinu B'chaye says, v'atem yadatem et nefesh hager, lo amar et hager, el et nefesh hager. It doesn't say you know the ger. It says you know the soul of the ger. Klomar nafsho shvela v'nichna'at ve'enav tamid el Hashem. See, you can see people, when we think of ourselves, we always perceive ourselves in two ways. We perceive ourselves from the outside. We see ourselves as our bodies and the things that we do. And that's the same way other people see us. That's what we have in common with other people. We perceive other people. We see their bodies in time and space. But we perceive ourselves in a way which is unique, in a way which we do not perceive other people. We perceive ourselves from the inside as well. We sense our own pain. We sense our own joys. We sense ourselves, you could say, as interior beings. The challenge, and I think the pasuk, the way Rabbeinu B'chai is explaining it, v'yadatem et nefesh hager, the challenge is to see other people the way we see ourselves. The way we see ourselves is we see ourselves from the inside, not only from the outside. And we can assume that other people also experience themselves from the inside, even though we don't have access to that. So that is basically empathy. So what we're supposed to extract from Mitzrayim is empathy. And that has to guide how we treat other people. And it can be very, very challenging because some of those other people don't necessarily like you. And that has to be brought into the equation. But it's very important not to take the wrong lessons to identify with the oppressor, right? Rather than to identify with the oppressed. So that's the first challenge, I think. Okay? Then, if we can separate in a healthy way from Mitzrayim, so then we can actually come to the following understanding. I want to take a look with you at something that Rav Tzadok HaKomi Lublin wrote. Okay, and he wrote this based on the parasha in Sefer Melachim. Okay, just to give you some background. After Shlomo HaMelech died, so Rechavam became king, and Bnei Israel began to sin. And as a consequence of that, the king of Egypt, Sheshak, Melech Mitzrayim, was able to raid the Beit HaMikdash and take golden instruments from the Beit HaMikdash. So it says, Vayihi b'shana ha'chamishit lamelech Rechavam, ala Sheshak melech Mitzrayim al Yerushalayim. Vayikach et otzrot Beit Hashem, ve'et otzrot Beit HaMelech, ve'et hakol lakach. Vayikach et kol meginei hazahav asher asa Shlomo. So he raided the treasury and took the clay kesef from the Jews. Let's take a look at what Rabbi Tzadok said about this. Ukemo sheshamati al Sheshak melech Mitzrayim nikra kain lashon shuka. That's very interesting. Why should the Navi tell us his name? Because there's something to understand about his name. His name indicates desire, will and desire. So Sheshak Melech Mitzrayim has desire. Mitzad otzem shukato la'asig rechush Shlomo HaMelech alav hashalom. Mitzad ze alta biyado. Because he was driven by desire, Sheshak, Lashon Shuka. He was driven by desire that enabled him to be successful in robbing the wealth of Shlomo. Okay? V'chazal amru al zeh, kesef Mitzrayim chazar limkomo. This is fascinating. He took it back. Think about it for a second. What was the clay kesef and the clay zahav in the Beit HaMikdash? Where was the first kesef and zahav? Where did it come from? What did they make the Mishkan out of? It was the clay kesef and the clay zahav that Bnei Yisrael took out of Mitzrayim. So 500 years later, Sheshak Melech Mitzrayim comes and takes the kesef and the zahav back. That's how Chazal look at it. It comes around. Sheshak Melech Mitzrayim takes back the clay kesef and the clay zahav. Chazal say, kesef Mitzrayim chazar limkomo. Perush. Ki kol tokef memshelet uma hu kefi tokef hacheshek shelahem. The French call this, in World War I, their didn't work for them so well, but their the battle, the military strategy was called elan, right? Cheshek. It was when you have hitlahavut, right? When you're fired up, we have to motivate our soldiers, and the motivation will win, right? So that's what he's talking about here, right? That the power of any nation is not necessarily in their natural resources, but in tokef hacheshek shelahem. What is it that gets them fired up? Le'eze davar shebo yichud kocham, and that's where they express their unique strength. V'cheshek Mitzrayim, and what was the unique strength that Mitzrayim had? Haya lechochmot, kemo shemuva, delo haya chochma kechochmatam. What was unique about Egypt was their wisdom, right? If you ever just the ancient wisdom of Egypt, this was something that was understood. Like, how did they build the pyramids? How do they mummify people that the mummies are still basically intact thousands of years later? They had some sort of wisdom. So that is what is unique about Egypt, is that they had a desire for chachma. V'lachein, now look what he says. V'lachein hayu b'nei Yisrael avadim. That's why Bnei Yisrael were enslaved to Egypt. What does he mean by this? V'zeh ta'am shekibel, and he's going back to Avraham. Shekibel Avraham Avinu alav hashalom matanot miMitzrayim. Avraham Avinu, it's very interesting. Avraham Avinu accepts the gifts from Mitzrayim he doesn't accept the gifts from the Knaanim, right? From Melech Sdom, when Melech Sdom offers him gifts, he says, no, I'm not going to even take a shoelace from Melech Sdom. And he won't take from the Knaanim in the story of the burial of Sarah, and they want to give him Marat HaMachpelah for free. He refuses to take the gifts. He insists on paying. But from Egypt, he accepts gifts. And the accepting of gifts from Egypt is very symbolic. Sha'al yedei zeh. Everybody with me here, where I'm reading? Can you see that? Sha'al yedei zeh zacha l'shnei kilyotav kishnei rabbanim v'hayu milamdim oto chokhmah. Right? Because the gifts that he received from Egypt, when we say that he accepted the smalot, and when Bnei Israel take the smalot and the kesef and the zahav, it's not about the physical, the physical goods. The Torah wouldn't be so interested in that, right? According to the way Rabbi Tzadok is thinking about it. They are symbolic of spiritual and intellectual gifts. So by virtue of the fact that Avram Avinu encountered ancient Egypt, that gave him wisdom, right? Zacha l'shnei kilyotav kishnei rabbanim. His two kidneys became like two teachers, right? We talk about feeling things in our kishkis, right? So Avram Avinu was able to intuit the chachma of the Torah, right? That's what Chazal mean when they say he was Mekayim Taryag Mitzvot. In other words, he was able to intuit the truth of divine revelation precisely because he had an encounter with ancient Egyptian wisdom. V'hayu melamdim oto chokhmah shekalat hacheshek lechokhmah shelahem. Right, what he got out of Egypt was a very important trip that Avram Avinu took to Egypt. Right, what he acquired in Egypt was an understanding of the desire for chachma. Rak shehu chashak lechokhmat emet. Right, and they wanted chokhmat tme'ah. But so it's not about even the content of what it was they were interested in, but the side of the desire and the enthusiasm that came along with the content. So he was able to pick up the cheshek for chokhmah, and that's what he gained out of Egypt. V'zeh inyan haftachot yitz'u b'rechush gadol u'bizat hayam v'hu hachana l'chokhmat haTorah. I don't know anybody else that says this. This is pretty amazing. He says that the sojourn in Egypt was necessary as a preparation for Kabbalat HaTorah. If we didn't encounter Egypt and Egypt's thirst for knowledge, we would not have been able to stand at Har Sinai. That is something to which we are indebted to Egypt. We don't normally think of it that way. But without Egypt, we couldn't have been Mekabel the Torah. Rak, okay? So now he takes it back to Shlomo HaMelech. Ubishlomo HaMelech alav hashalom ne'emar v'tarev chokhmat Shlomo mikol chokhmat Mitzrayim. Right? By Shlomo HaMelech, he was the wisest of all, and his wisdom exceeded that of Egypt. That's what it says in Sefer Malachim. Dahainu chokhmot chitzoniyot shelahem. V'chol cheshek Shlomo, the desire of Shlomo, haya lechokhmah. Sha'al zeh bikesh b'chalom rak zeh. And that's why in the dream that he had, he only desired the wisdom. V'kach kocho kavua b'rechush. V'lazeh chashak sheshak. V'chazar limkomo. Because what he's basically saying is that Shlomo HaMelech, because of his own desire for chokhmah, already transcended what Egypt had to offer. And at that point, Egypt could come and take it back. So it's a description of an internal journey of the people in terms of the development of their consciousness, because the process of the freedom, he's basically saying that we weren't really free from Egypt until Sheshach came and took back the clay kesef and the clay zahav. Until then, we had a debt to Egypt, our desire to understand, the desire to connect to God, to understand secret wisdom, that all came from Egypt. And it was Egypt's desire that we carried with us until we became mature enough and we understood it ourselves. At that point, we become free from Egypt. We're no longer indebted to Egypt. Now, the reason I'm bringing this piece from Rav Tzadok is to underscore the fact that he could take a look and look back, in a sense, dispassionately at Egypt without anger. And he could say, you know what? There's a tremendous amount that we owe Egypt. It could be that right after Yetziat Mitzrayim, it would be asking too much from the people to understand the debt, right? They just escaped the servitude. They just escaped the horror. So to say, you know what, you're indebted, that's too much. But we have to develop a distance. Right? On the one hand, a deep feeling of empathy towards what we ourselves went through thousands of years ago, but at the same time develop a healthy distance and understand that we're not in the same place. And that allows a healthy relationship looking back. It's like working out a trauma. So the distance that he's described, that is here, is that there's enough distance to be able to look and say, without Egypt, we couldn't be here today. Notwithstanding the terrible things that Egypt did to us. And the Torah asks us that when it says, Lo tata'ev mitzri ki ger hayita ba'artzo. So the relationship is really complicated. The imagery of the Torah is a birth imagery. And the relationship, even the positive relationship that we have with our mothers, like how many people spend thousands of dollars on therapy? I know there are some therapists in the group, right? So that even in the best of terms, in the best of situations, it's complicated. In the case of Egypt, it's doubly complicated, where the mother that took us in, the adopted mother, right? The mother that took us in the time of famine, also oppressed us and didn't want to let us go. So on the one hand, she took us in, but on the other hand, the oppression was horrific. So it's complicated. And to free yourself from that, to be very careful not to learn the wrong lessons, not to be reactive, but to be looking forward in a healthy way. And I think that's what Rabbi Tzadok Komi Lublin accomplishes in that piece. Okay, so right now I'm going to unmute everyone, and I'm going to look at the עד שבאו תלמידים ואמר להם רבותינו הגיע הזמן קריאת שמע של שחרית. So what's happening in that story? The Chachamim are transported into this place which is beyond time and space. They're back in Mitzrayim, so time and space has stopped for them. But present-day reality has this nasty habit of asserting itself and intruding upon our idyllic consciousness of just being someplace else. And the Talmidim come and they intrude with, it's morning, it's time has returned. Right? You have to step out of Mitzrayim, and now you have the world of Kiyum Mitzvot, and there's time-bound Mitzvot. You're not in this timeless space anymore, transported in your consciousness back to Mitzrayim. Now you're back in the world. So the Haggadah is those Zikanim in that timeless reality back then. So that's why maybe you don't have expressions of that. It's not the time. It wouldn't be authentic to sit back to say I'm in Mitzrayim and how much do I owe these Egyptians that are throwing my babies into the water, right? So that wouldn't be authentic, right? So the authentic thing is to recognize, right? To recognize what's going on at the time, but not that shouldn't be your orienting experience. I have to tell you, whenever I see like around Yom HaShoah, like the F-16s flying over Auschwitz, it always gives me the creeps. It always gives me the creeps. It makes me feel like it's the wrong response. It doesn't mean we don't, Baruch Hashem, we have an Air Force, we can defend ourselves, but it's the wrong response to that, right? It's very important to keep it straight when we have distance on it, to keep the experiences, every experience in its proper place. So when we descend into Mitzrayim, so we don't have the distance, and you can't ask ourselves to have the distance. But when we live, for those of us who live here in Israel, when we live in a situation where we have sovereignty and we have power, we have to realize that we're not in Mitzrayim. Baruch Hashem, we're not in Mitzrayim.
Can I push back a minute?
Yeah, go ahead.
I'll just say that I hear what you're saying, but we don't have another ceremony in our Jewish life that talks about Kigerim Ha'item. We have Leila Seder. It's the major experience of the Jewish world, so we're entrapping ourselves in the past.
Yom Ha'atzmaut. Read Megillat Ha'atzmaut. That's my Zionist answer, right?
Okay.
All right, where it guarantees rights to minorities. That's the most important counter push. Anybody else? Let me see if they hold on one second. I'm just looking at this at the chats. Yeah, I'm reading Miriam Camarini's comment. Yeah, 100%. Yes, talking about midwives and the birthing, the beginning of the birthing in that story, and then how it's the birth for the entire nation. It's also a reenactment of creation itself. This creation is also emerging from the water, right? The Teira'eh Hayabasha, the waters recede and the dry land emerges. The same way that the waters of Yam Suf are split and the people emerge. Yeah. Okay. Right. Okay. So some in terms of Yatat Ger and not Oyev, I appreciate that. Okay. That's why I said that we have to be able to Oyev, yes. Nazis, no. Right? They're not Nazis. That's just the example that I'm giving. That would be applying the incorrect model. They may be oivim, there may be solutions, or maybe not. Right? That becomes a political question, but it would be the incorrect model to apply. And we have to just be careful about what models we use. Okay? Yes. Okay, any other questions? Comments?
Not a question. I just want to wish you, it's Nachum.
Oh, Nachum. Okay.
Just want to, from the US here, saying thank you and Chag Sameach.
Okay, thank you, Nachum. It's good to see you.
From the Starks in Cleveland. Thank you.
Yeah, hi, Bob and Marla. Woohoo! Mazel tov.
I felt